And so we were really lucky that he could come up and visit Rutgers, and I'm looking forward to your talk, so welcome.
Thank you everyone for coming. And we have free food, I guess.
Welcome to the sandwiches.
So feel free to, I think you can just move even during my talk to grab something to eat. Thank you, Jen, for a nice and a little long introduction. So like she said, actually we went to same school, and actually we are in the same research group for a while. And actually I'm going to spend some time talking about one theory that I've been using for my research about urban communication. Actually, Jen was also heavily involved in this process of developing theory and doing research together. And then I still remember Jen was leading our effort to develop some of the important scales, including belonging scale, ICI, and all those things that which we're still using for our research. So I'm really happy to see you here. Actually, it's been a while, and also I'm happy to be here to see some of my old friends and colleagues, and actually even my former student, Yong-Chan. She actually I was advisor for her master's thesis, and I was trying to persuade her to stay with us for PhD studies, but she deserted us and decided to come here. I hope she didn't make a big mistake. I see strong disagreement. So anyway, today, what I'm going to do with you is I'm going to talk about the story about a city which is 1,000 miles away. Of course, the name of the city is Seoul. It's the capital city of South Korea, where I was born and grew up. And so actually here, I don't know how clearly you see the background picture here. So actually that's the contour of the city, Seoul. So here you can see Han River running through the city. And actually this map, kind of map, is made based on georeferenced tweets from the people in the city. Okay? So the reason why I show this map is that actually this is the kind of things that I'm going to try to say to you today. So what I'm going to deliver to you today is how new communication technologies are embedded in everyday lives of the people who live in the city. Okay, so basically my talk today is composed of 3 parts. The first, I'm going to spend a little time talking about the city itself, just what's happening there, because I spending some years as a faculty member in the States, and then actually I went back to Seoul 6 years ago. So I had the chance to look at the city, even though the city, I was born here and grew up here, but it's been actually 16 years. So I stayed here and then I went back to there. So actually, strangely enough, actually the city looks really strange to me. I look really foreign. So I used that opportunity as a chance to look at the city as outsider. Insider and outsider people. You know what I mean? I was kind of boundary. So I think I had a really fun time to look at the city and to learn about the city, even though I thought that I'm really familiar with the city, but there are so many things going on that I had to learn. Okay, so I'm going to share some of the stuff that I have learned about the city, and then I'm going to move on to talk about the theory, which is communication infrastructure theory that I was actively participating in developing with Jan and other colleagues under the direction of Sandra Bolokich, who's my advisor. And so I'm going to talk about this theory, and then I'm going to share some of the recent empirical findings about this topic. Okay, sounds fair? Okay, this is Seoul. We are actually looking at all the downtown area of the city. So we are looking at the city from north, and you see the mountain that's called Namsan, and you see little tower that's called the Namsan Tower, which is probably has been the most popular and probably most symbolic, landmark of the city. Okay. And let's do some little geography stuff. So, Seoul is composed of 25 local districts, so that we call gu. So there are 25 gus. Okay, you still see the river, Han River, running through the city. Okay, so what's the typical scene of neighborhood in this city? Okay, obviously it's not something like this. Even though I wish I could live in this lovely, beautiful neighborhood with Korean traditional, housing buildings. Sadly, this is a reality. The most of people live in this kind of tiny, box type of building that we call apart. That's how we pronounce apartment. Okay. Actually, this has been quite a symbol of Korean modernization and urbanization. Okay, so actually this kind of type of the new type of residence started only 50 years ago, right after the war. So actually, people started building this kind of residential the buildings since after late 1950s. Okay. Okay, and also I want to talk a little bit about Korean history, not much of it. So actually, we spent the first half of the 20th century with some of the tragic events, including Japanese occupation for more than 30 years. And then right after this, of course, there was a terrible Korean War. So we just spent the first half of the century, with these two tragic events, and right after this, actually there's nothing much left in the whole country, especially in the city, Seoul too. So actually, the country just started from the ash, just from scratch. So right after this, actually the country spent the second half of the century, for the rapid and radical, industrialization and modernization and urbanization. How radical and how the rapid? So actually, back in 1960s, only less than 31%, 30.5% lived in urban area. But now, as of 2012, 92% of Korean population live in urban area. So within probably about 40 to 50 years, probably a little longer than that. So actually, whole country have been urbanized. Actually, this kind of rapid and radical transformation. Actually, Seoul is at the center of this rapid transformation. But what's the consequence? What's the consequence of combination of colonization and war and urbanization, modernization and industrialization within just 1 century? Okay, probably a little less than a century. One of the consequences that we can look at is just we have lost the neighborhood. Okay, so people were uprooted from their own places, so they just moved around, and then actually the neighborhood and neighbors just disappeared. Okay, I think that's the situation that we are in. So basically, in this kind of situation, people cocooned in their own tiny box type of the apartment. Okay, so people don't really care about what's happening, or care about what's happening even in the next door, and the people in the same building. Okay, so the neighborhood in Seoul probably geographically very close, but far distant socially. Okay, I think that's the situation about neighborhood in Seoul. So I usually joked about this situation by asking, where are the ends of the earth in Seoul? Where are the ends of the earth? The end of the earth in Seoul isn't just next door. You know what I mean? So usually people in Korea and in Seoul are really proud of having fastest and most the powerful IT infrastructure in the country. Okay, but with this, I think they are able to connect to anyone in everywhere, no matter where they are, except for the people in their next door. You know what I mean? So where are the ends of the earth in Seoul? The people in the neighborhood. Okay, so that's the situation. But recently, probably when I went back to Korea, went back to Seoul, so I witnessed, and actually other people too, witnessed some hints of change. Not a big change, but still I think meaningful and significant changes going on in the city. So there have been many interesting attempts by different groups of people of different format in different parts of the city to rediscover and recover and redevelop neighborhoods. Okay, so I'm going to maybe some of the one of the examples is this. In the last decade, local community media really, this is the real small scale mom and pop type of really hyper local the media have mushroomed in many different neighborhoods in Seoul. Okay, I think this map actually again this is the map of Seoul. This is the examples of those local media, hyper local media efforts in different parts of the city that have at least survived at least until last year. Okay, there are many things going on. Actually, I have spent the last maybe 3 or 4 years meeting those folks who are responsible for producing making local media in different parts of the Seoul and interviewing them. And actually, I found really interesting findings. But unfortunately, I don't have much time to share those findings from my interviews. But actually, this picture show. Can you find me? So actually, this is a podcast radio station that's serving one of the poorest working class communities in Seoul. Okay, run by this lady, and actually, is a high school student who's volunteering to help her. Okay. Anyway, there are other examples and of the local media in Seoul, but I don't have again much time to talk about each of these. But even though actually each of them has really interesting stories. Okay, so maybe next time. And also there are some schools and religious organizations and other types of community organizations. So usually, even though they are located in some specific local communities, but usually they are not. They don't have meaningful connections to their local communities. Okay, they are just physically there. But actually, there have been many interesting attempts of those organizations to get back to their own places and then try to make meaningful connections to people there, and then other organizations in physical local communities. And then also there are some grassroots resident-led projects to develop kind of common spaces where residents neighbors can get together and meet other people from the same neighborhood, and then talk about what's going on in their neighborhood, and then maybe they can do something together. Okay, so here well, maybe they build some kind of theater and cafe, library, and something like common space where people can get together. So actually, one of the most interesting cases in terms of this kind of neighborhood revitalization movement that have been going on in Seoul is this community that's called the Seongmisan Maul. Maul actually literally means village. Okay, so you can also call it Seongmisan village. So this village is the upper river, upper Han River. It's kind of north and west side of Seoul. So here there's a little hill. It's called actually Seongmisan. So this neighborhood actually is surrounding this hill. Okay. So here, so this is basically a residential area. A lot of residential, the buildings here. And then in that space, there are about 700 households that are connected to this, 성미산 마을 revitalization movement. That means because there's 700 households, usually each household has about 3 or 4 people. So that means about 2,000, 3,000 people are connected to this, the neighborhood revitalization movement in that place. Okay. So actually, this 성미산 village is really interesting because since mid 1990s, so people have built a lot of different things in the neighborhood, including schools. They have their own schools, and then daycare centers and a nursing room, and then clinics, cafes and bookstores, and even they have built their own theater. Okay, where the people get together, and then there's usually a lot of cultural events going on there, and then also they use it as kind of community gathering place. Okay, so anyway, this is a map drawn by the people in that community, and then actually this is what I just talked about here. The theater, 성미산 마을, and then this is the little bookstore. Actually, this is a very tiny but very pretty bookstore. And then this co-op store, and then actually, they have built so far 4 co-housing buildings. So where between 7 to 9 families share the same buildings. Okay, so a lot of different kinds of community build-up efforts going on in 성미산 마을. But they are not only community that have been doing this kind of job. There are other places where we can find a similar efforts throughout the city these days. Okay, so some hints of change going on. So, but I think here probably some of you might notice some little strange thing. There are some place which is blank. Okay, nothing is going on. So do you know what? So I think there are some Korean people here. Know where it is. This place is usually called Gangnam. Have you heard of Gangnam style? So that's the most wealthy place, the well-to-do area. So I think that's interesting, but I don't have time to talk much about this. But still, I think this wealthy area don't really care about this kind of neighborhood revitalization efforts. So I think that's rather interesting contrast in terms of that. Okay. So what are the factors that we can think of as a reason for witnessing these kind of changes in the city? Okay, so I think we can think about at least these 3 factors. The first, I think we have to talk about political factor. Okay, so when we talk about political factor, I think we have to talk about current mayor, Mr. Won-soon Park, who has been who used to be a human rights lawyer, and then one of the most influential leader of NGO groups. So actually, even before he was elected, he said that neighborhood revitalization will be my top priority policy. And then actually he did that even after he was elected, and then he built special bureau and in his city hall. Actually, well, not big money, but he still set aside some the funding for different kinds of neighborhood development project. Okay, so I think we can think of political the factor, but I think that's just part of the story. Probably what's more important is a social factor. So most of these neighborhood level revitalization movement was led by not just by political figure like the mayor, but actually the residents themselves. Okay, so many of the projects actually started during either mid and late 1990s. And 성미산 is one of them. So who are those people who are heavily involved in these efforts? They are usually in their 30s, and most of them, actually majority, are in their 40s. And actually I belong to that generation. And then early 50s. So who are these people? Actually, they are the product of 1980s in Korean history. So actually, 1980s in Korea represent real pro-democracy movement era. Okay, so actually these people were actually they succeeded in getting their political goals. So they got surrender from then authoritarian governments. So actually they were successful in making the country much more democratic. That means these people are they belong to the generation with a really high level political efficacy and collective efficacy. So they have a really high level we can do it spirit. Okay. So now after they got what they wanted during the 80s, now actually they start putting their energy in local area. I think that's my interpretation about all those kinds of neighborhood level movements going on in Seoul. Okay. And then we can besides those political and social factors, we cannot forget other factor which is much more technological. Okay. I know. I think when people talk about new communication technologies, so we usually think about new possibility of making expanded relationship, and then we can connect to anyone everywhere, anytime, those kinds of stories. But I think at the same time, I think new communication technologies. Actually, today I'm going to focus on social network services. But including that, these new IT technologies, it also has potential for helping, especially people in Seoul, to take a new adventure in their end of the earth. Where is the end of the earth in Seoul? Next door, right? So it's really tough. It's really difficult for them to knock on the door and then know each other and then start conversation with the people in the in the same building. Maybe they can see each other in the elevator and then at the entrance of the building. Maybe they can just say hi, but that's it. It's really hard for them to build a real relationship. Okay, but now they have smartphone and social media and all those kind of new technology that probably you have been interested in. Okay, with this, I think now they become able to find other people in the same building, same apartment building, and then they have new ways to make a relationship with these people. Probably they don't really have to see each other face to face, but still they have new ways to get connected to these people. Okay, so now they are able to explore the end of the earth in Seoul. Okay, I think that's the possibility. That's the new potential that people have found in different parts of the neighborhood in Seoul. And actually, that's kind of issue that I'm going to share today too. Okay, I think I need to see some of them. Okay, I just said that new communication technologies have some impact. Okay, probably positive impact on local media, because I just told you that people are now enjoying new method to get connected to other people in the same neighborhood with the help of new communication technologies. But am I a technological determinist by saying that? But as you know, there are different theories and different approaches and different views about the relationship between communication technologies and communities, okay, local communities. So maybe some of them sound a little more pessimistic, like Shapiro. I think she just released a new book. I think she got even more pessimistic. I don't want to spend much time talking about books. But there are other people who are more optimistic rather than pessimistic. Okay, so here I just put some of the buzzwords that we have been using or hearing these days. So based on all of these words, so actually many people are trying to say, actually we are becoming better people. Okay, so we've become much more able to share what we have. You know what I mean? So we actually we are much more altruistic rather than selfish with this new new gadget, new communication technologies. Even probably based on this, actually we are much more able to build a more empathic community, okay, based on new communication technology. Even though this is just opposite, thought, as you're gonna find in Shapiro books, especially the new one. So there are really contrasting views about pessimistic and the optimistic views about the same thing. So how about you? Are you optimist or pessimist? So well, between these two views, probably this is too simplistic if I just differentiate different thoughts into only two groups. But I want to be something else. I don't want to be pessimist. Or at the same time, I don't want to be just a simplistic optimist. Okay, I want to be different. I want to be something else. Okay, so well, maybe I can use even use different terms. Maybe there are some of the people when they talk about the social impact of the new communication technology, they usually talk about pushing effect. Okay, so technologies will push people away from their own places, right? And also there are other people who are trying to find the other alternative path, talking about the pulling effect. So actually technology will have potential to pull individuals to their own places. Okay. So between these two, again, I want to present a little different stories. Maybe I can even call it conditional effect rather than pulling effect or pushing effect. So I like the word if. So I think my job, actually, when I did the research about this topic, so actually my interest always has been what are the conditions. So I think technology will have anytime. They have both potentials. It could have have a pushing effect, or it could have pulling effect. I think technology have both possibilities, but I think we really have to look at conditions. Okay, context. What kind of context technology will come in and then embedded in? I think that's one of the things. That's what we have to do as a researcher who are who's interested in social impact of new media technologies. So basically, today I'm going to talk about what we found from one of the articles that's just published. I think still online version status in communication research. So basically, my talk from now on will be based on this paper. So here, I told you that I want to be something else. I between optimist and pessimist. So actually, I'm using one theory to be different, to be something else, which is the communication infrastructure theory that I already mentioned. Because I don't have much time, I'm just spend a little time explaining, just core ideas of this theory. So communication infrastructure theory, or CIT, has been developed to explain how community-based communication resources function as critical components of local infrastructure for developing and maintaining local communities. Okay. So most basic claim, core idea of CIT is that strong communication infrastructure is the most important condition for urban neighborhoods with a strong sense of belonging and high-level community engagement among residents. Okay. Then probably you might ask, what is communication infrastructure? So what is that's the definition we have developed. So communication infrastructure is a neighborhood storytelling network set in its communication action context. Okay? Basically, it's composed of two parts, right? So first part is the neighborhood storytelling network, and the second part is communication action context. Okay? So basically, there should be a network among various types of community agents who are able to produce, share, and use community stories. Okay, so that's one part. And then there should be a much ecological component that either facilitate or inhibit the forming, neighborhood storytelling network. Okay. So I hope this diagram will help you a little bit about to understand what I just said. So if you look at this diagram, let's look at this internal. I think there are three oval, and they are all connected, right? So actually, we have found that there are in most communities there are three key agents who may have potentials to become storytellers about what's happening in their local communities. Okay, they are residents, of course, and then also local media, and then community organizations, all different formats, different kinds, and different with the different functions, right? So each of these community agents to be a community storyteller, so of course they have to produce and share stories about their geographically defined communities. Okay, they have to participate in this process of making stories and sharing those stories with others, right? But they have to go further, not just playing this role. Actually, they also have to encourage other agents to do the same thing, right? And then we can say that there is a network among those key community storytellers. So if this network works well, I think we can say that this community has a really good, strong neighborhood storytelling network. And then this network is again either facilitated or inhibited by all those kinds of ecological components from different kinds of resources, including schools, education, and some kind of economic resources, and then even some of the cultural stuff like kind of stigma and even reputation. All those economic and political and even some built environment related components will have some impact, okay, on your capacity to build this the network among those key community storytellers. Okay, so that's how we explain communication infrastructure. And then actually one concept that you need to understand to figure out what I'm going to say in next slide. Actually, we also developed new variable which is much more applied to individual level phenomena. So that we call integrated connectedness to storytelling network. So this is actually if you happen to live in a community with a strong communication infrastructure, probably you are more likely to get connected to your community level resources for talking about what's happening in your neighborhood, and then probably you're more likely to hear about what's happening from different storytellers in your neighborhood, right? Than others who happen to live in a community with a weaker communication infrastructure. But I think we also can find some variance among individuals, even in the same community. Okay, there are individuals who are much strongly connected to storytelling resources in their own neighborhood, compared to others who are less connected to the resources in the same place, right? So actually, ICSN was developed to measure this individual level variance in the same place, right? And then we have found actually from many studies since early 2000, we found that individuals with high ICSN, they are more likely to have higher level sense of belonging, and Jan was heavily involved in developing that scale. And then also we found that these people with high ICSN are more likely to have high level collective efficacy, and then they are more likely to participate in different kinds of community activities. Okay. And then now I have developed some of the theoretical propositions about communication technologies in the context of local communities based on CIT. Okay. So these are these four propositions. Or those propositions about new media technologies in communities. So first one is new media technologies must be part of the communication infrastructure of a community to function as a facilitator of community involvement. Okay, so it has to be really embedded in local community to show pulling effect rather than pushing effect, right? And then the second one. Is if new media technology does not work as part of the communication infrastructure of a community, it can be a detracting factor. In other words, it could show pushing effect, right? And then third one, whether new media technology will be incorporated into the communication infrastructure of local civic engagement depends on the existing quality and strength of the community storytelling network. Even same technology, what kind of effect it's going to show in different communities, it depends on the quality of infrastructure, communication infrastructure in those communities. Okay. The last one is my application to the individual level phenomenon. Okay. At the individual level, the use of new media by residents will have positive effect on local community engagement when the residents have high level ICSM. Okay. So which means that if you are less likely to connect to storytelling resources, which means that you are low in terms of ICSN. So probably new technology will have pushing effect. That means probably for you it's going to have a negative effect on community engagement. I think that's what the last proposition is trying to say. Okay, so I think I already mentioned this. So basically, this study, this communication research paper. So basically, we are trying to look at whether SNS use have positive or negative impact on community engagement. Okay, so for that, actually, we also have developed a new measure of the SNS use, which is an SNS dependency. It was developed based on media system dependence theory. So basically, this is a multi-dimensional measure of SNS dependency, but probably I don't really have to explain the details of that. So here are our research question and a hypothesis. So first, the research question is, does SNS dependency promote community engagement? Okay, which is very simple. And the first hypothesis was ICSN is a positive factor in local community engagement. You didn't forget what ICSN is, right? And the last one, which is actually the most important one in this study, the impact of SNS dependency on community engagement is moderated by ICSN, which means that there will be positive interaction effect of SNS dependency and ICSN on community engagement. Actually, we predicted that there will be a positive impact of SNS dependency on community engagement among those people with high ICSN. But actually, we also expect that there will be a negative impact of SNS dependency on community engagement among those people low ICSN. Okay. Then so data were collected in 2013 from those 25 districts in Seoul, and then as an outcome, so actually we looked at first we delete this local interest. Actually, we first look at neighborhood belonging, and then two dimensions of collective efficacy. The first one is informal social control and social cohesion, and then the last one is community active participation. Actually, we ask people whether they participate in different, the range of different community activities. So we just develop a kind of scope variable based on that. Okay, here's, and then this is the way we calculate the ICSN based on people's connection to local media, and then people's, the participating in interpersonal talk about what's happening in their neighborhood, and then also their connection to community organizations, to talk about community issues. Then here are results. Actually, first we found that SNS dependency, after controlling for other variables, we found that SNS dependency has positive impact on all those community engagement variables. Of course, the relationship strength is not that high, but still significant. And then we found that ICSN, people's connection to integrated connection to storytelling network, it shows much stronger effects on all different dimensions of community engagement. Okay, so actually it is suggested by communication infrastructure theory itself. And then these are the results for hypothesis number 2, which was about interaction effect. So actually we again we expect that there should be opposite direction of relationship between people with high ICSN and those with a low ICSN. Well, actually we didn't found that here. So there are two groups. This bold line is the high ICSN, and the dotted line represent the low ICSN. So actually in both groups we saw positive impact of SNS dependency on community engagement, right? But if you see here, the case of low ICSN, people with a low ICSN, the slope is really flat. So which means that there's not much impact, right? So actually SNS dependency impact was much more vivid among those people with high ICSN. Okay, actually we expect that there should be negative relationship among the people with low ICSN, but that wasn't the case. But still, there was a significant interaction effect like that. And then same story for other community engagement variables. Okay, so let me just summarize what we have found in this study. The first, SNS has the potential to be a facilitating factor. So it has potential to show pulling effect rather than pushing effect in the context of local communities in Seoul. And then also, ICSN is a strong and consistent positive factor in community engagement. And then last one, the positive impact of ICSN on community engagement was stronger among those with higher ICSN and those with a lower ICSN. Okay, I think this is my last slide. So what we can learn from all these results in this study. I think one of the things that we have to learn from this study is that there should be more effort to strengthen community storytelling agents, including community organization and community media, and then residents themselves, and then also the effort to build a network among them to make all different kinds of new communication technologies to show pulling effect rather than pushing effect. Okay, so I think we don't just look at technology per se. I think these results really show. This study really shows that we have to look at both communities, the condition of communities, and then some of the technological components of new communication technologies that we are interested in. Okay, I think that's the end of my story today. Thank you. Maybe I think we can spend some time, getting
we have
your
time for
questions and
questions.
comments.
It's just a clarifying question. I think I missed something. So SNS dependency means their reliance on SNS for community engagement?
Not for community engagement. Actually, thank you for asking. Because I just skipped that for the time's sake. So basically, with SNS dependency, what we try to do is, we really want to measure how important SNS has been in people's everyday lives. So basically, So we just look at all the, we have 18 different dimensions representing all different kinds of critical everyday goals people have to achieve to I would say survive and grow in their life. So if you look at, I think I have a table that shows some of the measures, some of the items there. So here, basically, media system dependency theory. They develop, the offer the concept of media dependency, but it's not really dependent on the media. But actually, here this understanding and understanding and orientation and play, they are just basic goals that we have to achieve to live, right, to survive. And then actually basically SNS dependency scale really measure how important SNS has been to achieve these basic goals of everyday life. So actually, some people may just to use just whether people use SNS or not, or maybe they can measure even time for using it. But actually, we thought that this kind of multidimensional measure should really capture the centrality of SNS in people's lives. It's going to take much more time to measure. Yes.
Yeah, related to that, so I think it's interesting because SNS are different from traditional mass media because they're interpersonal and mass.
Right.
And, you communicate with multiple audiences. And have you thought about, have you tried to identify certain dimensions that are more important than others? Just looking at this, I would think maybe if you're doing it for solitary fun or just personal expression, that might be less likely to be connected with community engagement than if you're trying to stay on top of what's happening in the community or, things like that. Have you looked at kind of how these dimensions relate to?
Well, actually we try to do that, but we haven't. There's some variance. And also, actually, we also found some difference. Depends on where you collect the data, and also depends on the people's age and all different kinds of socioeconomic factors. Also, make some interesting difference in terms of which dimension is more important. Okay, especially in the context of community engagement. So here, like Jen said, this dependency measure was first developed with the mass media. Okay, so actually we have to modify this measure to much better fit to SNS environment. I think one of the things that we did is that actually we added one new dimension, which is expression, because I think that wasn't possible with the mass media. So not possible, actually not impossible, but actually really limited capacity audience had in terms of expression. But now actually expression is a real new function that we can enjoy with SNS. So actually that's why we add this new dimension. But I think other dimensions, personal understanding through interpersonal play, I think interactional play, I think people still do with SNS as they did in the context of mass media.
I'm curious if they created some SNS specific for community engagement. For instance, in Brazil, they created one called, I will translate, got sugar, because sometimes you go to your neighbor to ask for sugar. I don't know if it's like that here too, but in Brazil, it's an expression used. And it's for people sharing stuff, exchanging stuff nearby that we can find nearby, I don't know, hair dryer or something to share and to exchange. And another one was for time sharing, like if I want to learn Korean and you want to learn Portuguese, we can exchange. It's not what a lot of people use it, but it's a way to create engagement, because of big cities we don't know the neighbors, not only in Seoul but in other big cities too. And are they startups creating some SNS, those kind of things there in Seoul, or what kind of SNS they were using?
With specific SNS service
Yeah.
I've been using. Well, people use Facebook, of course. Twitter is probably much less popular these days. So actually here in this study, actually one thing that I didn't really say in terms of SNS dependency, actually we didn't ask about all different kinds of SNS here. Actually one of the things we did when we measure SNS dependency, actually there was one question that we asked before actually we measured this. So the first we asked them, what SNS service people use, okay? Then maybe they just mention all of the services that they have been using, and then we asked them to pick one specific SNS they have been spend most of the time using, and then we found that only 18% chose Facebook, and then 1.5 chose Twitter as their primary SNS, and then the rest of them, probably about 70% chose KakaoTalk as their primary SNS. Okay, so basically, actually,
What
this.
about Cyborg? Does anyone use
Not anymore. I think it's almost dead. It's almost dead. Yeah. KakaoTalk. Basically, probably 98% of the people who have smartphone use KakaoTalk. So basically, I think you can even see these results as a result about KakaoTalk. Okay. So basically, after we asked them to pick one primary SNS, and then we asked them for all of these questions. I think answer give your answer based on your primary SNS. Okay. Maybe some of them may answer if they chose Facebook, their answers will be about Facebook use. If they chose KakaoTalk, their answers were about their KakaoTalk use. Of course, actually, when we actually analyze our data, we control for their primary SNS services. So, okay, yes.
I was curious to know, Seoul, are they mostly like transplants that are there, or are they like natives? Like as in like in New Brunswick, like it's mostly people that are not really haven't grew up here. You know what I mean? They're from everywhere, all around New Jersey or America. So in Seoul, are there still natives there that like grew up there, or are they there for work? Are there families?
Yeah, there are natives, but they are really real minors. So mobility rate is really high in Seoul, but it's going down because housing market is just unbelievable. So for example, Gangnam area, tiny apartment apartment with only probably about 2,000 square feet. It just costs like $1 million. So it's just impossible for most of people to go into that those neighborhoods. So I think that's one of the factors that really reduce mobility level still, but mobility rate is really high. So people just move around. So there's only a few people who probably have lived in the same place more than 10 years. Okay, so only a few. I think that's one of the I told you about the history of Seoul, but I think probably I just give you just a rough idea about what has happened. But this housing market, real estate issue also has to be into our understanding about those neighborhood, the lost neighborhood issues. So people have to move around. I think that's one of the reasons why it's really difficult for people to develop the neighborhood. But Seongmi-san and other projects that have been going on, actually they try to stay in the same neighborhood. Okay. So I think that's one of the reasons why we see some those changes. So even so, there still I think they are minority in the whole picture. Okay.
Yeah, I have a question on your interaction research, the interaction between SNS and IC. Is it that research or interaction is that really short can be a magnifying effect, like richer self-features and closer. So if people have a richer research, they become more.
Yeah, you could say that. If you're already heavily involved in community activities, probably you are more likely to take advantage of this pulling effect potentials of your communication technologies. They use it to get even much more even more strongly connected to your local communities.
Did you find any evidence that SNS dependency can affect the ICNI?
ICSN.
ICC? Like those SNS can affect the conditions or the research?
Again, it depends.
Depends.
Yeah, it depends. So if you have really weak ICSN, so probably you have less chance to use those new communication technologies to boost up the ICSN. So again, the richer get richer for kind of.
Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.
Help yourself to sandwiches. From your food left.
Actually, one of my follow-up studies after this was published in American Behavioral Scientist.
Oh,
That
yeah.
was edited by
Vicky
Vicky
and
and Kit.
Yeah.
Actually, there I even used the term like a localized ICTs or localized use of ICTs. So actually, I even mentioned some of the examples that have been localized.
So what are some examples of that?
Well, even Facebook. I talked about how Facebook and KakaoTalk has been used for different kinds of local events and local the activities. So even though again Facebook has the potential to for you to find the strangers no matter where they are. Well, actually many people use it to get even more connected to their local areas. Right?
But even beyond, I think there's probably differentiated uses if you're using Facebook to connect with, relatives and friends that are in other locations, versus like connecting with your community.
Yeah, well, yeah.
If
both
you're
potentials.
on your town's, Facebook group, like that's different than like communicating with your cousin in another state or something.
Okay.
I'm curious, are you familiar with a social networking site called nextdoor.com? So I checked them out the other day, and I tried to sign up, for our own little neighborhood. And it's
So I signed up
it's
too.
very it's dead.
Currently.
Yeah, there's not a lot of activity on it. The site's been around
Actually, it
for
depends. Actually, my neighborhood is really active.
really
Yeah.
in Seoul.
No, in
DC?
I'm
Oh, in Maryland.
in Maryland.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, then maybe it's a local New Jersey thing. Maybe my neighbors just aren't
Your
very
community
neighborly
infrastructure.
online.
I have some problem.
Yeah.
Well, I mean the barrier to entry, I think, is a little high. They ask each person who signs up to email 10 people in their immediate neighborhood to sign up, and
Yeah.
I don't think I know 10 people on my street. I don't think I have their email addresses, even if I just say hi to them every once in a while. So I just wonder how practical is it to impose or just create these SNSs specifically for localized neighborhoods. How successful that's been practically, and this is the one website that has come to mind. I don't know if there are other ventures out there.
I think there are other, the apps and other services which is very similar to Nextdoor. And actually, we have, similar things, similar, services in Korea too.
Okay.
But still, again, actually, my point here is that it really depends on your community.
Yeah.
So we cannot just totally rely on, technology itself. So actually, the current neighborhood that where I'm living now in Maryland, I'm really surprised to see, people are really actively, involved in, this Nextdoor. So actually, there are more than 10 people, they post at least once a week, something like that. And then recently, local police department, they got engaged in Nextdoor too. So they posted some of the local events and local accidents in Nextdoor posts. So I think people get those the information about what's happening. And yeah.
So I'm curious, how would you describe your neighborhood? Is it heavily, is it high density? Is it urban? Is it young people? Is it educated people?
It's in Columbia, Maryland, which is it's urban. It's urban, and I don't think it's a young people
Okay.
area. So it's just a typical residential areas. But I think Columbia is actually interesting city because it's quite actually they say that it's one of the city that has been designed the city. So I think there are some actually already existing community activities. That
yeah,
boost
I
up
think
those
that-
kind of
yeah.
activities. I think that's my point. Actually, people
Yeah.
based on those pre-existing efforts, they built on that. Actually, Nextdoor was adopted, and then actually people
Yeah.
even more engaged in community. activities.
So you know Hampton's study on Netville, and that was a planned community from
Right.
the bottom up, and I think that has a lot to do
Yeah.
with the success of these sort of networks. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you for the mentioning Nextdoor.
I was curious because I thought it was kind of a nice idea, but completely unsuccessful, and I don't know if I just came across it like by coincidence, and was it a bad idea, or was it just a bad idea? I'm curious to know what other people's experience with it has been. So thank
no
you.
one has a membership in Nextdoor.
All right, well,
Okay.
thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.